Okay, we've got another episode here. Going to have a conversation with Kevin Prentice, who was a protege of Henry Picard. So anybody who's studied Ben Hogan would know about Henry Picard. But if you don't know about Henry Picard, you're going to learn about Henry Picard now. Alex Morrison, Gardner Dickinson. So Kevin,
Oh yeah.
welcome to Advanced Ball Striking. Let's talk golf.
Let's talk
Some great
golf.
stories here. I can't wait to hear it.
I've been listening and watching your content. It's great. You're
Thank you.
really on it.
Well,
Unlike most people about Hogan. But here's my dog. Oh, anyway, um, go ahead.
okay, so let's talk a little bit about your background. You said you were in Northern California,
I
and
grew
then
up in
you
Northern California.
moved up to
Yeah.
Montana, and then you got dragged down to Florida, right? One of your
Well,
buddies took you
I wouldn't call that being dragged to go to the club where Nicklaus and Grout and these guys practice. So no, I wasn't dragged. But yeah, I started out. I grew up in Northern California, junior golf. Um, I got in the golf business in '82 up in Montana, and I was doing 6 months in Montana, 6 months at my municipal course in California, and um, I would go from April to the end of October in Montana. So we were getting to the end of March, and I think I was getting ready to leave for Montana like the next day or something. And this guy comes in the shop, and he was looking for a job. I said, "You can have my job. I'm out of here." So I told him who to go talk to. He took my job. I went to Montana. That was 1983 in the spring, early spring,
and
and
where in Montana?
Billings, Montana. Actually,
Oh,
it was outside of Billings at Prior Creek Golf Club, a place called Huntley. Yeah,
okay.
the deal was I could be the assistant. They paid me $600 a month. They would give me some meals at the club, but they just built this brand new clubhouse, and I could live in the apartment. And I got up there, and
Okay.
the general manager, who was the son of the owner, was living in the apartment. So I didn't get the apartment. I ended up down in the trailer with mice running over my legs and no running water and that whole thing. So
Wow.
anyway, we're in Montana, finish the season, come back home, and I go to a bar, and I run into the guy that I said, "Hey, you can have my job." And he starts talking about name dropping, Nicholas and this sort of thing. I just thought he's full of it. So I didn't think much of it. About a week or two later, I run into the guy again, going into the same bar. He starts talking the same stuff. And I'm thinking, I've had about enough of this. I keep hearing this. So we leave the bar, and he says, "I'm headed down to Florida to meet with my dad. Do you want to go? He can help you with your game." So I thought, well, maybe he's not full of it. And anyway, I talked to my dad. He said, "You got to do it." I get on the airplane. We go out to Florida and meet his dad, wake up the next morning. And here's an interesting thing. We're on Pacific time. So we get there, and I'm not tired, and everybody goes to sleep. And there's a golf book there. It was from Bob McDonald from 1927. I opened the thing up. There's an illustration of a guy chopping a tree with an axe. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? That's okay. The dog's causing a problem over here.
Well, I got a cat behind me, so we'll
Uh,
see what
um,
happens.
I forgot where. Oh, okay. So
Cutting down a tree with an
saw the
axe.
book, and the next morning uh, we go out to the club. It's Frenchman's Creek Golf Club, and it was designed by Gardner Dickinson, 36 holes. It's where the Golf My Way video that Nicklaus produced, it was on that range. So it's a big range, circular range. And so his father takes
You're
me.
down in Florida now.
Yes, we flew
Yeah.
down to
Okay.
Florida. We're at the Frenchman's Creek.
Okay.
It's that morning. He says, "I got lessons all day." So he fills up a couple of large baskets. He takes us to the end of the range. So it's myself and Keith Marks Sr.'s son, Keith Jr., who was the one that got me out there. So the two of us are standing there. His dad's standing there, and his dad says, "Okay, I got all these lessons. I'll talk to you guys later." Right then, a white Trans Am drives by. And he goes, "Oh, there's Jack." And Jack owned a Pontiac dealership. Like 5 minutes later, here comes the Pontiac, comes back, parks right there on the back of the range where we are. Jack gets out. He's wearing tennis shorts, little tiny tennis shorts. All right.
This is Jack Grout or Jack Nicklaus?
Jack Nicklaus.
Jack Nicklaus. Okay.
So it's myself, Keith Marks Jr., Jack Nicklaus. Okay. I was anyway, so that's what happened. Then Jack Grout showed up, and Gardner Dickinson showed up, and Tony Penna showed up, all within, 30 minutes. So we're there just kind of hitting balls. And then Keith Marks Sr. shows up and says, "You want to meet Jack?" So he walks us right over there, right through the crowd. It's like the parting of the sea. Go up there, meet Jack, all that, So fast forward, I think it was the next day, maybe 2 days later, his father had a few minutes. So he looked at my golf swing. Now, the day before I got on that airplane to get to Florida, I shot 63. Now, yeah, that's my home course, but it's still 63.
This is 1980. This is 1983.
This is 1983. This is December 83. Okay.
December 83. Okay.
All right. So I shoot 63, get on the airplane. Here's Keith Marks Sr. He says, "Okay, let me see you hit." I hit like 2 shots. He looks at me, he says, "That won't work." He said, "That won't last." And then what he was saying is, it's a 4-round tournament. That's a golf swing that might last 2 rounds, 3 rounds. You might get lucky twice a year, it'll last 4 rounds. But consistency, you're going to struggle. Okay. So I've been my whole life, everybody's been saying what a beautiful swing I had and all that. I was waiting for somebody to say, "Well, that ain't worth a damn. You need to fix that." So as soon as he said that, I went, "Yeah, you're my guy." So he starts teaching me the Morrison stuff with the footwork.
And this is Alex Morrison.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is stuff right out of the book from 1932.
So
Okay.
tell us about Alex Morrison, just for the people that don't know. Now, Alex Morrison was a great player and teacher in the Hickory era, right? Just kind of at the transition.
In the early part of like the 1920s.
Yeah.
He was
just
a golf
before the steel
professional, but
shafts
what?
Just before the steel shafts came in, right?
Oh, yeah. Well before the steel shafts came in. So he was an assistant pro, and he's on the range, and he doesn't know the golf swing, and he's teaching somebody, and that bothered him. And I know that feeling. I've been there. So he started thinking about it, and he had an engineering mind, and he figured it all out. All right. So then he produced this book called A New Way to Better Golf in 1932. It became a big bestseller. I think there were like 32, reprintings or something. Okay. So Morrison's in New York at his studio teaching. Henry Picard is at Hershey Country Club as the head professional,
Right.
not far from each other. Henry Picard's assistant is Jack Grout. Okay. So, and you can read about a lot of this story in the book, Getting to the Dance Floor by Al Barkow. There's a
One of my great friends. Al's one of my great friends.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's also a great chapter on Jackie Burke, Jr. That, that's a good chapter to read. So anyway, Morrison was one of the top players of the 30s. He won 20-something times on the PGA Tour, but he got to 1935 and he was struggling. And another player told him about Morrison. So he went to New York. He saw Morrison, and Morrison got him going on some things. And Picard, started winning again and bought into it. So then Picard would take lessons, and obviously Grout was taking lessons, and Grout ended up with taking that information and taught it to Nicklaus, and then it just flows outward. Picard taught the footwork to Sam Snead. He talked to Hogan about the footwork. It's a lot of these, the greatest players in this game can be traced back to Alex Morrison. Like Arnold Palmer, I'm standing on the range. He tells me about the footwork that his dad used to teach him was Alex Morrison footwork, that sort of thing. So Morrison kind of started it all, but like a lot of people that are ahead of the game, so to speak, similar to the movie Moneyball, where he goes and gets interviewed by the owner of the Red Sox, and the Red Sox owner says the first guy through the wall always gets bloodied, and that would be Alex Morrison. That would be David Lee with Gravity Golf, and I'm sure there's others. So Morrison was kind of an angry guy, and he and the PGA didn't get along. So anyway, Picard is taking lessons from Morrison, as is Grout. All right. And then let me see. Oh, okay. So that's kind of where Morrison's in New York, and he's doing his thing, and Picard's helping him, and Picard's helping Sneed some. He's talking to Hogan, and Hogan and his grip and that sort of thing. And we get back to Florida, where Keith Marks is the teacher in Florida that I met up with. I got there through his son, and Keith Marks Sr. was a protege of Picard. And in fact, Keith Marks Sr. took a lesson from Picard in 1971. I got all the notes. So, I'm going crazy. I'm writing the notes down. So he helped me with my game. I go back to Montana, and I start working on it. I get better. And the U.S. Open's coming up, and I put, entry. And the closest local qualifier was in Boulder, Colorado, which was 585 miles away.
Right.
So myself and my other assistant from another club jumped in his car, and we drove down there.
Wow.
And I ended up making it through there in a playoff. I started off like 3 over after like 4 holes. And
So this is the local qualifier, and then you got to go to the regionals, right?
Yeah. So there was 135 of us. I think they took 12 or 13. I was in a playoff for the last spot. I won the playoff.
Oh, wow.
I made it through. All right. Now I go back to Montana, and we're going to play in another, week or two is when they have the sectional. The sectional is going to be in Fort Collins, Colorado. And there's going to be 23 of us for 3 spots. So I go down there. This time I flew. And I show up at Fort Collins Golf Course to practice. And I'm on the putting green, and there's Tommy Armour III.
Yep.
I don't really know him. I know the name. I've seen him. I don't really know him. But anyway, we ended up going out and playing, and we had a good time. And I was noticing that I was keeping up with this guy. All right. So we get done playing in the morning, and he says, let's go grab some lunch. We grab lunch. He goes, you want to play some more? I said, yeah. So we go back out there. I'm really keeping up with him. Okay. So next day, get up. I'm paired with the local hero, the club pro local hero, Skip Treadway, who used to play the tour. And he goes out and shoots 66. Okay. I mean, he played well. And I think I shot like 70 or 71. All right. So we get to the second round, and I'm playing beautifully. Can't make a putt. I get to the last night. I tell my caddy was the dishwasher in the restaurant at the club, and it was Monday, and he was available. He didn't play golf, so he couldn't really help. But anyway, so I'm playing with Skip, second round, and I start catching up, and we get over there to like the 16th hole, and I knock it in there like that, and I miss it from 1.5 feet.
Oh, no.
Yeah, 16th hole. So I'm standing on the 17th tee, and he's 2 ahead. And the 17th tee at Fort Collins was playing about 208, and they tucked the pin right over the bunker, and, the only thing to do is go right for it at that point. So I looked down there, and I said, make this the best swing you've ever made in your life. And it happened. Okay. I knocked it in there, tapped it in for birdie. it shook him up so bad when I hit that shot that he pulled it. All right. He makes bogey. We go to the next tee. We go to the last hole. We're
So you're
tied.
tied. You're tied. Okay.
Okay. And we tie, get in, seeing what's going to happen. Turns out we're tied for the third spot. We had Ric Flair, I think, was low. And I forget who the other guy was. But so we go to the playoff, and, I ended up winning the playoff. And so I'm in the U.S. Open. I mean,
Wow.
2 years before, I was unemployed. I'm living in a trailer in Montana,
I love
no
this.
running
Great
water.
story. So now this is at Wingfoot, right?
Yeah. So, show up at Wingfoot. It's Sunday. Everybody's over at Westchester, at the Westchester Classic, and except for a few of the bigger players like Nicklaus was out practicing and so on and so forth. So I'm going to play a practice round. And where I'm on the first tee, it's just me and my caddy. And he says, hey, I'm going to go grab something to drink. So he goes and does that. I'm standing there. Here comes Johnny Miller. Walks right up on the tee and asks me what I'm doing. Or, what you want to play? Well, I've already got my ball in the fairway. Sure, I want to play. So we start walking off the tee. I hear, back then, we wore real spikes. I hear this clack, clack, clack. And I hear this, hey, Johnny, wait up. I'll play with you. It's Ray Floyd. Okay. So I got Ray Floyd, Johnny Miller, and myself. And, they had nothing to do with me. Johnny Miller was very nice. Ray Floyd didn't speak to me. He finally said, I think it was on the 5th hole, he asked me what club I hit. And that's about all I got out of him. But anyway, so, I got some help from Keith Marks with my game using the Morrison kind of, concepts. And so I went back to Montana after the Open, and I said, I want to play the tour, and I can't get there from Billings, Montana. So I got to get close to this teacher. So just so happens, the golf gods shine down again. There's a club in on Hilton Head Island that Keith Marks was opening up a golf school. It's called Vintage Golf Schools, and it taught the Alex Morrison principles. It was endorsed by Alex Morrison, who was then living out in Riverside, California. So they were the cart guys outside at this club in Hilton Head. We had 3 courses there. They were selling green fees. Somebody down at the bar at 1:00 in the morning that plays golf, and the bartender says, hey, if you go see so-and-so, you can play this course, and, you just tip him. So they were doing that. They got caught. There was a spot available. So there was a spot to get a job. So I came out to, the club, and I'm working outside, and I got like 6 other guys that they're all from the South. I don't know what the hell they're saying. I can't understand them. They could have been talking Chinese for all I knew. I came from California, But anyway, I start teaching in the golf school. We're teaching the Alex Morrison thing. And when I first got there, which was in January of 86, I didn't have a place to stay. So I stayed with Keith Marks Sr., my teacher, that sort of thing. So we teach during the day, then we go back, start drinking Dewar's, that kind of thing. And I didn't know who Alex Morrison was. When Keith was helping me with my game with those things, he wasn't telling me that's Alex Morrison. Okay. Now I'm sitting around, and Keith is actually calling up Alex Morrison on the phone out in Riverside, and they're talking on the phone back and forth, speakerphone. So Keith's got like 40 hours of talking with Morrison, and Morrison was tough to deal with. I mean, if he would hang up on you. He hung up on Keith more than once, I'll say that. But it was like Forrest Gump. I'm out here in Florida with Nicklaus, and I'm looking around going, how did I get here? Then I'm over here and I'm sitting in this room, and you got this teacher, and I'm hearing all this stuff. And, it's like, wow. Okay, so things are going well, and I'm thinking, man, I want to see, Henry Picard. Henry Picard's only up the road an hour. He's over in Charleston, but Keith, I didn't get the invite. I waited over a year before I could go see him, and so went up there. It was myself, Keith Marks Sr., Keith Marks Jr., and the other instructor, and that's when I first met Henry Picard.
So
And
what year is this? Is this 1984, 85?
that would have been after the Open, and that was I got in Hilton Head in January of '86.
Okay.
I first got up with Picard in '87.
87. Okay. Okay.
Okay, so we would go up there, the four of us, and Keith Marks Sr., he wouldn't hit any shots or anything, but the three assistants, with his son, myself, and Pat Holloman, we would take instruction from Pick, and Pick was old school. I mean, he would wear a white Oxford shirt, long sleeve, with khaki pants, and sometimes he'd wear a pith helmet, and it was kind of comical looking, but and he was very proper, and he was very smart, and he would tell you once.
So, but he's probably what, 80 years old at this time?
He wasn't 80. I don't think he was 80 then, but
Because he lived to be 90.
Old.
Right? He lived to be like 90.
Yeah, right around there.
Okay.
Okay. So
he's getting close to 80. He's in his late 70s, probably.
and he wouldn't. If you were stupid, he wouldn't teach. You know, you know how these old time instructors were. You had to behave. Do the right thing, so on and so forth. Example, this other assistant, he's built like a linebacker, and he can really hit it. And Pick tells him to hit a 5-iron, and he hits it, about 220. And this is in in the 80s, when that was really something.
Well, yeah, and, right. Blades and Bellotto, yeah.
Yeah, so Pick tells the guy to, okay, let me see you hit that 5-iron to that 150 sign. Well, he hits it like 200 again. And he said, I said the 150 sign. He hits it like 200 again. Okay. And Keith Sr. told me later that Pick came up to him. He says, don't bring this guy back here, because, he said he's stupid, and that's kind of how some of these old school teachers, that's.
Yeah, he wants to see a trajectory shot to the 150 with a 5-iron. He wants to see a little half swing, and
he wants you to play a shot.
Shot. Yeah.
And as far as like when he was teaching you footwork, the Morrison footwork, which is to roll the right ankle in with the heel.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the Morrison footwork. So explain that to us.
Okay, well, you start off in the starting position where your left hip's a little bit higher than your right. So you're favoring the left. The right is draped in a little bit. Left is the boss. Right supports. Okay, everything moves back together. The torso, arms, club. It shifts the lower spine. It shifts about an inch or so to the right. And as the weight begins to come off the leg, you roll the left ankle in. And the heel's still on the ground, toes still on the ground, insteps still on the ground. Now, if you're going to play a longer shot, because of the speed and the windup, that left heel is going to rise possibly. Okay, but it first rolls inward, coupled with the shifting of the hips. It gets you over to the right hip joint. Mm-hmm. You turn on the right hip joint.
Yeah.
You do not turn when both feet are planted. You never turn when both feet are planted. You turn on the right hip joint, you turn on the left hip joint. Okay. So the first part of the swing is to shift it over here. I'm on the right hip joint. Now I'm going to wind up. The right hip starts to come back, and the hips turn and they turn the shoulders. It is not the shoulders turn and the hips stay back behind. They would, Pick and Keith, they would say, the hips turn the shoulders. When the hips get done turning, the shoulders will continue to turn. All right. And that's true. You can do it the other way. That is a way of doing it, but that is not a natural way for our body to move. And that's key. Everything you did had to be a natural way your body moved. So second move is to wind up, and now I'm going to start to downswing, and the weight's going to come off the right side. So I'm going to shift it laterally to the left foot. As that weight moves this way, that right heel will roll inward. And then depending on the shot, it's going to rise. Now, if you're standing there pitching the ball 10 yards, that foot's not rising. If you're driving, that foot's coming up.
Right.
Okay. But the focus of it is, it's not just a foot coming up. You got to dissect the whole foot, kind of like the way the weight transfers. It moves to the front of the foot almost and slightly to the outside. And then while it's doing that, it's also moving to the heel. And the reason why is, get this, it's the third law of motion, action, reaction. If I've got something moving this direction, to balance it, I have to have an opposite and equal go in the opposite direction.
Right.
So if I shift back and the weight starts to move towards the front of the foot a little bit and maybe to the outside, it's also at the same time moving to the heel. That's how it moves. It moves that
Right.
way.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
All right. So now when that heel comes up, you want the right heel closer to the left foot than the front of the foot. And that's an indication of lateral. Okay. You can read about all of this in any of Nicklaus's books. He describes it. Jack has a book called The Full Swing in Pictures. And he goes all through that. Okay. So we would do this drill. We needed to learn head position. We needed to learn footwork. We needed to learn plane, this sort of thing, and posture. And posture, not so much as how I'm standing at the ball, at address, but how I am moving through the shot, through impact. All right.
Real quick, what were his thoughts on stance width? The width of the stance. Did he favor a wider stance, narrower stance, or just something neutral?
Well, it's your game. It's your swing, so you get to do what you want. But I'll tell you this: a wide stance gives you more stability. Yeah. Narrow stance has less stability.
Right.
A narrow stance allows you to wind and unwind the hips and torso, whereas the wide stance, it doesn't move as much. Here's a perfect example. Mo Norman. He's got a super wide stance.
Yeah.
Okay. He tells you, I do it all with my shoulders. I don't do anything with his hips. Well, he does use his hips, but he's got that right leg angled, inward because the stance is so wide. That's like a stop sign. Okay. All right. So when he comes back, he can't turn those hips because his stance is so wide. And because his stance is so wide, he can't get up on his left hip joint like Hogan at the finish, So what does he do? He either has to jump up on top of the left hip joint by making some kind of gymnastic move, or he's got to bend his left knee and move it laterally forward. Down.
Exactly. That's exactly
Which is exactly what he did.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
If you look at, and you've heard enough of Mo. I've watched him. He was at Disney twice, and I sat there and watched that, took pictures, listened, whole YouTube. He tells you less moving parts. True. His whole swing was built on less moving parts. But this is kind of the way I look at it as far as his arms and everything. There is strength and stability when your movement with your body is closer to the center of rotation. So the best strength and stability for me with my arms and my hands would be close to my body, right up underneath me. If
Yeah.
I get my hands out here, now I got instability. I'd go, okay, but you could still play out there. And the reason you can is because there's no slack from the center out to the rim. It's like centrifugal force. You got the rock, you got the string, you're doing this. The faster you go, the tighter that string goes, the truer this happens.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
But here's the thing people don't, I don't know if they don't get, they don't know, it's not told to them. It's the opposite of centrifugal force. It's the force that has to balance out, because centrifugal force is moving outward from the center. It wants to pull you that way.
Right.
You have to have a counterbalance to that pull, and it has to be equal and opposite directly, how it rotates. All right. So I can stand in the center with my arms extended like Mo. And as long as I keep my arms out here like this, and my center is somewhat centered, there is some movement, then you can repeat that over and over again, So, but you can't hit it as far. The more you get your arms out here, you can't hit it as far, and you're going to be less consistent. So I learned a lot from David Lee with Gravity Golf, and he talked about what is called the safety envelope. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
No, I'm not familiar with Gravity Golf, although I've heard about it, but I've never read the book.
All right, so we all have a safety envelope we're not even aware of, and that, since we're standing up, okay, we want to ensure that we have balance standing up, and we don't want to fall down. So there is, if you drew an oval or a circle around you like a halo, and you moved your head back here, there becomes a point where you lose your balance and fall backwards, or you fall that direction or that direction. But your brain is wired for you not to injure yourself. So as you start to fall back there, you automatically move to the center. Okay. So, and David started talking about the laws of motion and how everything to balance and be in equilibrium with your golf swing. I start paying more attention not to what's going on at the club head. I start paying more attention to what's going on at the opposite end, which is my left shoulder. Okay. So if I can keep the slack from my shoulder through my arm, through the shaft to the head, okay, if there's no slack, then that thing's going to move true. And the faster you swing and you keep the center, the truer it gets. That's
Amen.
why Hogan said it.
Amen. I love it. Yep. That's exactly
why Hogan said.
Exactly what I teach. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Pick said it. If you have a true swing, you swing harder, it's better. It swings better.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, anyway, so David started talking about this safety envelope, and there's a lot to that. I'm not going to go into it now, but in the golf swing, we want motion. People are afraid of motion. They have, static this, firm this, all that. We want motion. Okay, swinging that golf club and what we're trying to do, there's a lot of different activities athletically, where the pivotal axis is swinging around. All right. And we're using the same muscles. We're moving the same way. It's not like golf swing is in a vacuum, and it's completely different than everything else the human body does. So basically, if I stay within this safety envelope, which is right here around me, I can move around as much as I want without any issues. Once I start getting my arms out there or my, head out that direction, now your golf swing goes haywire. So, I forgot where I was on that. What was your question?
Well, we started talking about the footwork.
Oh, okay.
And Alex Morrison.
Well, I
talked
I
about
thought
stance width a little bit.
This more.
Yeah.
And as long as I kept everything in here, I could increase my movement. I can increase the size of my turn. I can increase my weight shift. Um, so, so I thought of it almost like I'm in a batter's box. Instead of a rectangle, it'd be like an oval. Okay. Then you got the infield. You can play in the infield. You know, my arms can be out here and I can play. The further out, the harder it gets. Okay. Now, this was big in the old school guys, and it was drilled into me is golf is played on the inside half of the ball. You're standing in the center, the object is out here, you're hitting a sideways blow to an object. Okay, so it's got to come in an arc from the inside. So basically, you own the inside of the ball. You don't want anything to do with the outside of the ball. That's above the plane. That shatters the glass.
Yeah,
So
we would call that the 430 line in advanced ball striking.
yeah, I heard, and there's a lot to what you said about that. So um,
I love hearing the different interpretations of, the concepts are the same. They have to be for great ball strikers. And, to hear different ways of explaining it, is interesting because, I can always learn as a teacher, just hearing other ways and other ways of describing the same thing that people can relate to.
all right, let me. I'll jump forward to the whole Hogan thing a little bit. Okay. Um, like I said, when we go up there to see Pick, he was not just helping us with our game; he was teaching us to be teachers. Okay. And it was always myself and the other guys. And then I forgot how I was able to pull this off. Maybe anyway, um, I was able to get up there to see Pick and just myself. And we didn't meet at Charleston Country Club. We would meet at this like tin cup beat up driving range and par 3 on James Island or John's Island, I forget which one, outside of Charleston. I mean, it's right out of Tin Cup. It's worse than what I saw in Tin Cup. Okay. and the thing about Pick is he took a liking to me because I was interested in the history of golf. I was interested in these old players, and I asked questions, and he liked the fact that I asked questions, and we were sitting there I was standing there, he's sitting there. And I just, I'd start talking about how did Snead do it? How did Jones do it? How did I wanted to know because that was something that Pick taught us. He didn't just teach us one way. He didn't just teach us, this is how Morrison does it. Okay. All right. We would learn, like, you have to train your hands. You have to educate your hands. So we would train our left hand. We would release it. We would square it, all these different things. I can go into that later. I just drew a blank on that, but
Well, you were talking about Hogan, Henry Picard, jumping forward.
Yeah. Okay, so I asked him about Hogan. Okay, and this is in the afternoon. It's just him and me, and it led into him start to talk about Hogan's swing and how he swung the club, and that led into him showing me, which led into me doing it and trying it and him teaching me and showing me. Okay. And then when we were done, he didn't say, don't tell anybody. He didn't say, the only thing he told me, he said, the more you know about the golf swing, the less people you can talk to. That's the same thing that Keith Mark Sr., his protege, said to me, around the same time. And of course, I had to, it's like sticking your hand on the stove and getting burnt. I had to get myself burnt to finally learn that lesson. That you just need to keep it to yourself. So I kept this stuff to myself for 38 years now. And this is why. When we got done that afternoon and he gave me the information, it would have been like, okay, here's your new toy. All right. And, or here's your new car. But you have to figure out how this thing runs as far as what are the parameters. Okay, so you have to play around with it. How much you can rotate that hand open. If you want to swing like Hogan and you're rolling that face open. And where are you rolling it? Are you rolling it at impact? Are you rolling it at the beginning of the second, half of the move? Are you rolling it this much? Are you rolling it that much? How are you? I mean, the more you get into it, you know how it is. It gets more and more and more. Okay, we know he got weak grip. Okay, he rolls it open. He cups it sometimes.
Yeah.
The face comes up here. When he's really going after it, that toe's hanging straight down at 6 o'clock.
That's right.
Okay.
It is.
And we wanted it flat. Okay. Flat? Yeah. So how flat do you want it? And do you want it to come in and go flat? Or do you want to take it out and throw it over your shoulder back behind you to go flat?
Lee Trevino, right. Lee Trevino.
You see the famous picture of him. He's got a mid-iron. I think he's playing over in England or Scotland. And it looks like he's got the shaft laid off and the club's pointing back here.
Right.
Well, the further out you go on the first move, the more you have to go back behind you to get underneath the plane or get on plane.
Or under it. Yeah, under it. Right.
Now, here's the thing. I started paying more attention to what the club was doing. All right. And everybody's focused on the head. And you spend all this time from where the head starts to all this business back here to down here. There's no work done over here. It's all over with. That's bullshit.
That's right. It's bullshit.
Right? Now,
that's been my big battle trying to convince people of that,
Here's an example. I was trying to work, how Hogan's right arm worked straight through the ball and up high. So I'm working on that. I was struggling. And I started thinking about that. I'm trying to make something happen with my shoulder. All right. And okay, you think about this. We have a golf club and a head, and then we have a handle. So, they have to circle around in opposite. All right. So I started paying more attention that once I come through, all right, I want that face tangent to the arc. And I start paying attention to where that club's going here, what the face is in relation to the arc. And once I started working on that, I kept trying to see how far I could finish. I kept working on getting to the finish. Screw all this. Just get to the finish.
Good.
Keep the pace. And I would imagine that there was something on a top shelf over here. And I try to get through and knock that off the shelf or something like that. And as soon as I did that, that shoulder issue and trying to get over there went away. All right. Because my focus was on the dynamic of the swinging club, like your hands. Okay. Like I said, we all know he did this. Okay. But literally what's going on in here with my palms and my fingers and it's a freaking party. I mean, I'm leveraging, I'm pressuring, like I said, we trained our hands. We trained this left hand to do all kinds of things. Both Pick, Gardner, and Hogan. They all said the same thing. The left hand is a carburetor of the swing. You tune your swing. You tune, your shot with the positioning of the left hand on the club. I had a lesson from Gardner Dickinson, 1994. No, 94. It was 96. And Lokahatchee Golf Club down there in Florida. It's Monday. The place is closed. And I met Gardner at Frenchman's Creek in 84. He was a jerk. He didn't want anything to do with you. I met him, that kind of thing. But he didn't want to help you. So anyway, it got set up to where I could go down there and take this lesson from him. And I met him, and he had had a stroke. So now he wasn't that ornery guy that he was. So we go out to the range, and John, I'm telling you, I've taken a lot of lessons over the years, and it seems like every time or most of the time when I start the lesson, I struggle, because something's wrong. Okay, so I hit a ball or two, real nice. Gardner's sitting there in the cart watching me. And every shot I hit, it was one of those days, it was like every shot I hit was right there. Boom, boom, boom. He asked me to do something. I did it. And the flight everything was going well. I couldn't believe it. And so then he focused on the left hand. And then we started tuning the left hand. And he was wanting to see how weak I could get that left hand, hit it full power, okay, and have that thing go out there. And it looks like it wants to draw, but it won't. The spin is so tight and it's done so well that it just hangs straight, and then at the end it just kind of falls off. Okay, and then we went the opposite way. So I'd start here, I'd move it just a little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit, So we're playing around with this to make it draw more or whatever it may be. Now, this is important. If you want to try to learn how to swing Hogan or whoever, you don't go to that driving range, okay? You do the work around the pitching the ball. Pick told me, he said, you learn your big swing by learning to pitch the ball. Everything you do pitching the ball is just a smaller version of the big swing, okay?
It's kind of walk before you run kind of thing, right?
Yeah. All right. So we would train the left hand. He would take us over to a railroad track. Okay. And we're going to pitch a ball, and we'd take it up, we'd open it, we'd drop it, we'd square it up against the railroad tie. Learning this, we'd start here, open, square. Or if you didn't want to have that kind of a grip and you wanted a different, release, was a strong grip where you're having the left palm to the ground through impact. Okay. We'd practice that to square the face. All right. We practice shaft, not shaft lean. We practice putting the head on the ball. He said, if you can't put the shaft up against the ball at impact, you can't play. And if you're the teacher and you can't teach your student to put the shaft up against the ball, don't take their money. That's your job, is to teach. All right. So I need, and more important than putting the shaft up against the ball, or not more important, is what is that doing? Is it's training your left side. Because, okay, he'd walk us over to a tree, all right, and we'd beat the hell out of the tree, or we'd beat into the ground at the base of the tree. Now, your brain is wired to not get yourself injured. So when you come down there, like you're chopping wood and you're beating into the ground right at the base of that tree, your left side is firming up and it's turning away. And I hold my chin back. Your brain doesn't want your head to go this way because of the tree and the blow. It wants to have it go that way. Okay? So we would chop wood, and that left side would firm up and they'd rotate this way and the head would go back. Okay. You go over there and you'd pitch that way. You learn to pitch that way. And basically I learned to deliver the club head to the ball, to strike it. And I did it not just standing there on 2 feet swinging a golf club. I do stuff like I'd be at home and I'd take a golf club and I go see something and I want to hit with it. And I'd run over there. I wouldn't plant my feet. I'd just kind of run over there and bang, and then hit it, like exercise ball type of thing. And when I hit it, then I'm checking. I'm checking my feet, where my feet are, where these are. If you want to swing like Hogan, you're taking every piece of your body, you're laying it open, examining it, and you're exaggerating and finding out where the outside parameters are that's workable and what's not. Okay.
Exaggerating, right? Yeah, absolutely. You got to exaggerate. You got to take it to the limit.
This
Yeah.
is how you learn. This is how you learn golf. Pictures, exaggeration, repetition.
Repetition.
The
Yeah.
first thing you got to do is have a picture in your mind of what the hell you're trying to do.
You got to know what you're doing.
You can't produce it if you don't know what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Then, like I said, with pick, he showed me how Hogan did it. Okay. So now I got to take that and I got to exaggerate each piece of it. Okay. Here's an exaggeration.
To the choir here. That's clear. Yeah.
Hogan called his right foot his rudder. Okay. And the way you work your right foot and how you work it as a rudder, if you want, it works it slows down or works as a brake for your right hip. Just like Scotty. We would practice this. We had one drill where you would hit the ball, let's say a 7-iron. You would hold your chin this way. Okay. You would count to 3. And while you're counting to 3, you're telling yourself or whoever where that ball went, the flight of that ball. Okay. Without looking. You count to 3, you look up, you'll catch it at its apex. Because the ball's going to stay in the air about 6.5 seconds or so. So we train ourselves not to look up, exaggeration. That's an exaggeration, holding your chin back. All right. And we'd roll the right ankle in. And rolling the right ankle in, keeping the heel on the ground, or at least rolled in before the heel rises, that takes the right hip and it says, hey, take a seat for a minute while this does its business on this side before you come in to do your thing. So it's on page 52 of The Greatest Game of All. Nicklaus talking about practicing hitting balls, dragging the right foot. And he says in that sentence, I talked to Ben Hogan and he practiced it too. You can look at Hogan, you can see him hit driver shots or whatever, where he's dragging that toe, and we practiced dragging the toe. We'd hit shots, dragging the toe. I would practice hitting shots where I would drag not the toe, I would drag the instep, okay, from the toe to the instep. And I would drag it in the direction, like you see Scotty Scheffler.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Going the opposite direction.
I see all these people talking about Scheffler's footwork in the beginning, at least. It's all mannerism. It's sloppy. That's bullshit.
That's right. He's got great footwork.
Again, if you're standing close to the ball, and he stands reasonably close, I don't think he stands quite as close as he used to. For one thing, because of the centrifugal force going out, you got to counteract that going this way, and you got to create space with your body so your arms can come through and strike the ball. Okay, if I had a ball directly underneath me with the shaft vertical, could I hit it? I've trained myself to do that. How do I do that? Well, one, I throw the club up, I throw the club behind me, I take my right hip, I move it back here, I lower my center of gravity, bend my knees.
Right.
I've now got an angle to the inside of the ball.
430.
Now, I can't hit it very far or whatever, but I'll tell you, I can put the club on it and it's not going to go left.
That's right.
So you learn to put the club head on the ball to produce, it's like going in the kitchen and peeling, you're taking a knife and you're slicing the potato like Ginsu knife. That's, we delivered it different ways to produce different shots. And there's a lot of that in the Hogan swing. And what I like the business of Hogan said, he's got his elbows like this at a dress. You see it in 5 lessons. He didn't do that. You see that. You know that.
He didn't do that. He didn't.
But here's the thing. You can do something. I do something with my hands and my wrists while the motion is happening. that puts that where I want it. So here's an example. If I'm going to play a shot, all right, I'm standing there. I'm not thinking about mechanics. I'm thinking about my plane as far as the path. So Pick said, listen, forget this single plane stuff. There's two backswings. It's either in to out or it's out to in. Okay. And we learn both, which is beneficial. So anyway, I forgot where I was going with that. Let's see.
Well, you're talking about playing.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, how do I want to deliver this club? I'm not thinking how I'm going to necessarily move my body. I'm thinking about when this thing comes down here, I got to make sure that my left shoulder and everything is going there to keep that, keep the slack.
We call that the orbit pull in ABS. Yeah, that's the orbit pull.
Okay. Yeah. So let's say I'm going to take it away. I'm going to take it back. Mm-hmm. I'm going to sling it back, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm going to sling it back low. Okay. Because I want to get the slack out of the arm. I'm not going to start at address with my arms in an unnatural position. I want to put them in a natural position. I'm going to start that swing. The weight of the club and everything's going to move that way. It's going to take my arm and it's going to straighten it. Just enough. It's going to go from there to there. All right. Now, if I want to come down and deliver the left palm to the ground, all right, so the club's coming down and I'm thinking left palm to the ground and I'm giving it a little nudge, just a little pressure right there on that heel pad. Okay, it takes that shaft and it does that a little bit.
Flattens the shaft
down. It takes that left arm and left shoulder and it locks it in there like that. Not in a locked in as in a bad way. Okay. It kind of marries it up. Mm-hmm. All right. So now
body
I
tension.
come through here. I got my left palm to the ground. All right. And let's say I got a driver. I'm going to hit a driver. I got the left palm to the ground and I'm delivering the heel to the ball using the bounce. Okay. If you maneuver the handle coming into impact to where that shaft and club head wants to swing out, all right, with my hand down, which locks this up, all right, then I deliver the bounce with the driver, and what that does is it keeps the face square to the arc. It keeps it tangent to the arc. It rotates like this. It doesn't shut. So if you come in there flat and shallow with the heel, and now this thing is swinging out
Amen.
this way. But by pressing down, and you can find this in Bobby Jones's book. He talks about that. And this is very subtle. That's why I said there's a lot going on in the palms of my hands that are very subtle that you don't see that affect the handle, which does something with the head of the club. All right. So I'm coming down there. I got the left palm to the ground. I'm working the heel of my driver towards the ball, and I'm delivering the bounce like I'm in the bunker. And that shaft will come there. It'll square up. It'll stay square to the arc, and I can go all the way to my finish with none of this. It'll come in there, and it'll like that. Now I got stability. The face is stable. It comes through the hit. So as far as the Hogan thing did, yes, Pick showed me what to do, but he didn't. It's like this. It's like we went to a car dealership, you and I. Where are we going? We're going to the Hogan Golf Swing dealership. And there's an economy car, stripped down. And then there's a midsize. It's got some stuff. And then this over here, that's the nice one. And then this over across the street is elite. Okay, this is the stuff, the Hogan stuff that people don't know about, and that has to do with what's going on with pressuring in here, braking, leveraging, how what I do here is going to affect the head over there. If this shoulder comes low, if the shoulder comes up, what's it going to do here? And I work all that out, not on the driving range. I start by working all that out at home. Like we're standing here, I'm walking around the house I got my Tony Pennant driver behind me, or my McGregor DX Tourney keyhole insert driver.
There you go.
And I'm waggling and I'm thinking, and I'm like, okay, well, if I put if I do this, what's that going to do? Because it's all cause and effect, and it's all the laws of motion. If I do this, it's got to be balanced over here. As long as I keep the slack out and keep aware of the laws of motion, I don't have to think about straight left arms and shallowing the club. That shallowing the club, oh my God, I never even heard of that term until recently, last couple of years or so. Okay, we never talked about lag. We talked about putting the shaft up against the ball, to strike it at impact, applying the head with the shaft this way as opposed to, the handle going that way. All right. So we didn't talk about a lot of this stuff they talk about. We didn't talk about straight left arm. We didn't talk, and this. What's the difference between a good player, a great player, and the greatest players in the game? Well, if you look at their golf swings, the difference is from the waist down. Okay? How Hogan moved, how he moved his pelvis, his hips, his knees, his feet. Now go look at Bobby Jones. Same thing, narrow stance, different type, same thing. Henry Picard played with both. He was friends with Hogan. Okay. Before he got on to Morrison, he tried to copy Jones's swing. And he'd go watch Jones and talk to him and try to copy, including letting go with the last fingers at the top of the swing to take the club that's across the line. If you let go of it and then you grab it with these fingers when it's across the line, what's that do? It does that. That handle goes that way. That head goes that way. Now he can deliver it. Okay, so Pick tried to swing like Jones. He couldn't do it. And the reason why? Jones and Hogan, and there's others, but Jones and Hogan had God-given gifts of flexibility in the way they could move their body and turn their body. So, and that shows. You can see the dynamic. You look at their swing from the waist down, and what you're going to see is different than a lot of these guys. In fact, you're talking short game and putting. I was going to say, if you're just talking ball striking and whatever, you can look at video and remove these heads. You could just start from here down, and you could watch that, and you could tell who the good players are or who the best players are, just the way they play.
I agree. It's something we don't see in the modern game. All those great classic ball strikers, great strikers. If you were to go frame by frame from the parallel before impact to the parallel after impact, their hips, torso, everything's moving through the strike. There's none of the stalling. Now you see a lot of arm just going through. The hips aren't moving at all. Even you see sometimes the hips going, I think Dustin Johnson, hips are actually going backwards, as he's going through the strike. It's a completely different technique. And I think it's, to my view, I think the clubs are too long and they're too light, So, as you would know, that these, strikers in that era swung the heaviest stuff that they could, to the point of diminishing returns, right? It was about heavier clubs. It's an interesting progression because I've got clubs going back to the 30s, 40s, 50s. That the decade that had the heaviest clubs were the 1950s. Clubs were heavier than just the dead weight. I'm not talking swing weights. I'm just talking the dead weight, like a baseball bat. The dead weight of the club was heavier in the 50s, got a little bit lighter in the 60s, still pretty heavy in the 60s. Then the 70s came, stuff got like a half ounce lighter. And then when you got into the 80s, I think Dave Peltz had like these featherweight clubs, it's like feather lights and
I
all
remember
this
the
stuff.
featherweight. Those shafts
And
would
then,
snap like that.
and it just went lighter and lighter. And now, with the drivers, it's all about how long, how light. But back in the era that we're talking about of the great strikers, it was all about how heavy can you handle a 15-ounce persimmon driver? Can you handle a 16-ounce? No, I can't. So I'm going to dial it back to 15, 16. When I played on tour, I was swinging a 14 ounce to 14.5. I'm now swinging a 15 and a half ounce. I held Mo's driver, and his driver was 16 ounces, dead weight. And he told me that Hogan had a 16-ounce driver. He said Knudsen, George, was the great striker of that era, had the 16-ounce driver. I don't know about Sneed, probably see that too. And if you look at that classic picture of Hogan and Arnold Palmer at Augusta when they're wearing their blue cardigan sweaters with the cigarettes and they're leaning on their drivers. If you take a close look at the shafts that are going into those heads, those aren't driver shafts. They were sticking iron shafts, one iron shafts into their drivers, because now the heads are heavier, right? So they need a stiffer shaft to support the weight, right? And to support the leverage that's going to be created with those golf swings. And take a fresh look at that picture, and you're going to see that, and I've told this story before, but I was playing with Ron Chalmers and Al Barkow. We were up playing, and Ron was the president of Precision Brunswick, and they made the Hogan Apex shafts, right? And I had switched to going with these super, super stiff shafts, sticking one iron tipped, one iron shafts, because I wanted to have my deflection rates the same from wedge to driver. So I've got the same deflection. If I hung an 8-pound dumbbell weight, I want to see the same curvature from my wedge to my driver. And if I had wood shafts in there, then the driver's way down. Even with an X100 tipped a little bit, still way down. So I had to really tighten that thing up, taking a one iron shaft, tip it about 5 inches, extend the grip. Well, anyway, I was telling this to Ron because he was complimenting me on how well I was hitting the ball. And I said, well, I've gone to like just crazy X shafts in my driver. And, like I'd come up with this, like I was just some kind of genius, right? And he's like, oh, yeah. I said, yeah, guys are doing that back in the 60s. He said, we used to make those shafts. We would make these, one iron shafts. And he said we were sending them to, Raymond Floyd, Lanny Watkins, Arnold Palmer, Ben Hogan. They were all these. We made the Apex 5 shaft, which was a very, very stiff shaft in the woods. It was just kind of, it was just so matter of fact. It was just like, like Gary Player would say, there's nothing new, right? There's nothing new. And it was just kind of funny, when I had that realization. But that really is, that was something that those guys were very concerned about, was shaft deflection being consistent throughout their set. And now it's all about, frequency matching shafts. But the problem with frequency matching is that, shafts are not guitar strings. They're not oscillating. They're oscillating after you hit the ball. Yes, the shaft's going to oscillate, but on the way down, right? That's what matters down into impact. If you've got the same shaft deflection rate from your wedge to your driver, then you can use the same swing from your driver right to your wedge. And these guys knew this back in the 50s, 60s. Nobody talks about this now. It's lost knowledge. It's just lost knowledge. Okay, we're back with Kevin Prentice and our little part, we'll call this part 2. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I've been a little all over the place with this, but
no, it's so much. There's so much to talk about. I feel like there's so much lost knowledge. It's a tremendous amount of knowledge about golf that has really been tossed aside, and this big movement towards technology, TrackMan machines and flight scopes and looking at numbers and all this sort of stuff. But to play good golf, that stuff I think is fairly kind of meaningless really when they talk about ball speed and stuff. It's like if I'm hitting a little draw in, with a 5 iron to a back left pin, I'm going to hit it in the middle of the green and try and spin it back to a front left pin placement behind a bunker. I mean, what does a ball speed have to do with anything? You see these, this obsession with, distance, and I think, distance control, right? I mean, there's only a few times around when you're really trying to hit the ball as far as possible, right? And that might be on the par fives. So maybe 4 times there. And of the 10 par fours, typically on a par 72 course, you've got some dog legs and usually a few tight holes or something. So there might be another, well, let's just say another four times on par fours that you might really want to, get it out there. So you're talking about 8 swings. So, if you're going to shoot 70, 72, but only 8 of those swings, you're talking about maximizing the distance, if even that. So, I mean, there's so much of the game, the rest of the game. What about the other 62 shots? The other 62 shots don't have anything to do with hitting it as far as possible, right?
Yeah.
I go to a driving range and I see everybody just with, pulling their frying pans out and just swinging as hard as they can. And I just don't think that that's really the path to better golf. And, I just posted a video the other day of the golf course that we played, the Alberta Open, not that far from where you're up in Montana, but up in Pinoca, Alberta. And the golf course is like this. I mean, it's like, I mean, I still have nightmares sometimes of the 4th hole at that golf course. I mean, the shoot was like this. You've got a creek and just forest on the right. You hit it left, you're never going to find your ball. And then the green was, all water behind the green. And guys, it was so narrow. The pros were hitting 5 irons off the tee, just trying to get it in play. And then you'd hit it like a 4 iron into a green that's, surrounded by water on the backside. So you're coming in with a low trajectory shot. I mean, it was a golf course that was made for professionals. It was made for tour players. It's a tour player golf course. But it was absolutely fair. There was nothing unfair about the course. If you hit a good shot, you're fine. I mean, you didn't have to hit a great shot. You just need to get it in the fairway. You could take out a 5 iron and put it in the fairway all day long there. Pick a 4 iron. A 2 iron, you still feel like you got to hit a good shot. But nobody was hitting drivers there or 3-woods. There were a lot of holes like that on the golf course. And if you were off the fairway, sometimes you were in grass that was like 4 feet high. You can't even find your ball. And then you get that in the trees and the bushes and all that. So, we don't see, tour players don't play golf courses like that anymore. You never see anything like that.
Yeah.
Where you just absolutely have to hit it straight and ball control and distance control. I think it's interesting that Hogan, didn't use yardages, right? He wasn't a yardage guy. He cited everything just like you would if you're shooting a basket. Calculate, okay, I'm 16 and a half feet. That means I take my arm to this far and I go like, time, you got to feel it in, right? Quarterback, guys cutting across the field. I mean, you got to feel it in there. I think you can
Exactly.
feel,
100%.
I think you should be able to feel everything in with your sight, certainly from 150 yards. You got to be able to see that. You get a little farther than that, you're like, okay, 160, 70, 80 yards. When you're back 200 yards, you can tell it's not a 7 iron, right? So you look at the green and you start thinking about trajectory and coming in. I was always taught to try and come in with the lowest trajectory possible and that the green would accommodate, because the shortest distance between my ball and the pin is a lower trajectory, right? I mean, the ball doesn't have to travel as far on a lower trajectory. If I start sending it up in the air, if you take a string and you're going to take that all the way up in the air and coming down, that's longer, right? Now, of course, there's times when we need to hit those kind of shots, right? But if I can come in with a lower shot, I can just take a little half backswing, like a little pitch shot, take a 5 iron and go boop, boop, right in there. I'm not going to hit the ball too far off line doing that. Keep it low, out of the wind, control the golf ball. We don't see anything like that being taught now, and people are on the these TrackMan machines. They don't even know the TrackMan machine. It doesn't know what kind of shot I'm trying to hit. It doesn't even know where I'm aiming, right? It doesn't know where I'm aiming. I got on a machine, a while back. My path I tend to play kind of a push block a little bit, so I tend to aim left, work from the inside with a hold off, kind of a bit like Trevino. There's a little bit of that in my swing, and I was coming in about a degree and a half to 2 degrees from the inside, and my face is 2 degrees open at impact, and that's what the machine is showing. But the machine doesn't know where I'm aiming because I'm actually aiming a little bit right of the straight line. Like I'm aiming like that, just a little bit, about 2 degrees, right? So I'm going to come through. My path is 2 degrees, and then I'm keeping the face looking at the target, right? Keeping that inside. By doing this, I'm completely eliminating the left side of the course. It's just gone, right? The pull shot, eliminated. Never going to happen, right? So these machines, they don't understand. They don't know where I'm aiming, right? And another problem that I have is they don't know the mass of the club head. They don't know. It doesn't know. There's nowhere to input. Like, okay, this is a 15-ounce driver or something. It's funny because people talk about science, right? And, trust the science and the machines and stuff, and yet these machines are so unscientific because there's nowhere to put in the mass. So if you've got F equals ma, force equals mass times acceleration, F equals m mass, right? Force mass, right? Acceleration or momentum. P, they use P as the number for or the representation of momentum. P equals m mass v velocity, right? So everyone's all velocity crazy. Velocity, velocity, velocity. Guess what? There's an m in there. So the machine doesn't know. So I think what they're doing is they put in like a stock algorithm. Like they just figure, okay, well, the stock algorithm is 11 ounces or 10 and a half or whatever that the club head or whatever that number is. They just put something in. But the difference between my driver at almost 16 ounces and somebody at swinging a 10 and a half, 11 ounce lightweight frying pan, we're talking almost you know a third of a pound difference. A third of a pound. I mean, people are talking about grams, like they're worried about how many grams their shaft is. Grams? I'm talking about like almost a third of a pound difference, right? But these machines don't even, there's nowhere to even put that in. So if I can't put that in, totally, it just invalidates it. It's just absolutely worthless to me. It's not even taking that into consideration because good science would at least include the mass, right? I mean, that's in the equation either way. So anyway, that's
Well, you know how it is when we were back in the '80s and all that. We didn't have video. Like you said in one of your previous podcasts, if you wanted a video of, just say, Hogan, you had to know somebody who might have a video that he might loan to you. That sort of thing. If you needed to learn a piece of the swing, like I said, Pick would walk us over to a tree, or whatever. It's all organic. It's all natural. It creates pictures in your mind.
yes,
And that's how you learn. Now, what's happening now is all data driven. Okay. Numbers don't put pictures in your mind. I can't really visualize 2 degrees open. Yeah, I could probably, I played enough golf and put my hands there. I could do it. But everything's data driven. We didn't have that. So it's a different game. It's different teaching. Like you said, back when we played, precision meant a lot more, especially off the tee. And then you played usually a shot into the green. If the pin is in the back right, you're going in there coming from the left. And since it's on the back, you're probably wanting it to hit and run up to the back of the green.
Lower trajectory fade there, right?
That's another thing. Both Pick and Hogan, no side spin on pitching the ball. They said you want to try to draw your pitches. The ball will hit the green. You'll get the positive spin forward. They didn't like side spin on pitching the ball.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff like that. So anyway, it's a different thing. It's just like basketball. You know what they did in the '90s? They're down in the key, banging on each other. Now we're shooting 3-point shots from way far away. It's basketball, but it's a different game, and it's the same thing with what they're doing now as opposed to what we did. What they're doing now with what they're teaching with these ground reactionary forces, and you see, the left foot coming off the ground and swinging back behind him and all that. That's completely different than what I learned and what I taught. But the funny thing is I saw Mo Norman. This is early Mo Norman. This is like 1957. He's in an exhibition with Sam Snead up in Canada. Okay, he had a different golf swing. He had a longer backswing, had more wrist action. The club went to parallel. When he came down, his left foot ended up behind him and forward. I would say at a vector, 20% or 20 degrees this direction, which is what these guys are doing now, some of them. There's not that much new in golf. All right. This whole modern swing, I checked into this a little bit. The first modern swing in America was 1900. That was Varden. So Varden brought that. And then we had Jones, and we had Alex Morrison's book in 1932, A New Way to Better Golf. And then we had Byron Nelson, the modern golf swing. Now we got steel shafts, and Byron Nelson is the father of the modern swing, that kind of thing. And then we get into the 50s, and we got Hogan's book in 57, and that just changed everything. Okay, then we get Nicklaus shows up, and he's got a completely different, his elbows up here, and it's completely different. All right, so and then this one, 1970, square to square method.
That's my dad. Yeah, my dad was a square to square.
Curl it under.
Right.
Terrible stuff. Okay. That was the modern. I got the book. It's the modern swing. But the thing that you notice in these modern swings is the length of time between them is shrinking. Okay. So the modern swing in 1900, let's say it's 20 years later. Now it's not 20 years later. It's 6 years. And then it's 5 years. I looked it up. If you go look up the history of Tide detergent, it's the same damn thing. It started way back here. A few decades later, they got a new and improved, and then new and improved, and the time space between them is shrinking. It's the same thing with the golf swing, and what was it? As long as the human anatomy does not change, the way the human body moves to strike a golf ball is not likely to either. I mean, there's a lot of truth to that. Now, there's been some adjustments to that, but really, the major way the body moves to strike the ball is the same then as is now.
But I think what's happened is the playing field has changed. On a basketball court, it's still a basketball court. Football field is still 100 yards, right? It's still the tennis court's still the same dimensions. But the 6,800 U.S. Open golf course is now 7,500 yards or something, right? So we're talking 700-yard longer golf course. Greens are typically bigger now. They're cutting down trees everywhere. The Olympic Club, they just took out like 2,000 trees out there, and they just we'll just have a few of the trees, critical trees, or this kind of anti-tree thing. All golf courses are supposed to be, like links style kind of thing. What they did to Los Angeles Country Club, it's just like, are you kidding me? What they did? I mean, they just ripped out all the trees, turned into a links course or something. So they've changed the field. Now, another thing too, I talk about this a lot, is the the greens have changed dramatically, and the thing that's changed the most are the speed of the greens, right? So if we go back to when a lot of these courses were built, these great classic tracks that everybody's holds in such high regard, courses that were built in 1920s, 1930s, 40s, 50s.
Yeah, 20s. Those
The
are the
green
classic
speeds were
courses.
slow, really slow, right? So when you have these big undulations, if you were up above the hole, I mean, you could still hit the putt, would still hit it.
Yeah.
And I use the 16th at Augusta because that's a perfect example. It's on the Sunday pin when it's back left, right? In the old days, if you hit it out to the right, you had a downhill putt, but it was slow and you could whack it and it would go down the hill, right? But now you hit it over there and it funnels down in, right? I mean, it just gets on the slope and comes right down. So really, that's a lot easier than it used to be because you can hit it at the pin or you can hit it 20, 25 feet right of the pin and end up in the same place,
Yeah.
right? But in the old days, no, you hit it 20, 25 feet right of the pin, it would hang on that hill or be up on top, right?
Yeah.
So the putting surfaces are so good now that it's really tipped the game towards the good putters, right? Because you're on like pool table surfaces now. So a guy that can really roll it, can make a lot of putts. Where in the era that I was playing, the greens weren't nearly as good. So still, the good putters would make more putts than a putter that wasn't as good, but they're not going to make as many, right? They're not going to make as many. They're going to still miss some 5 and 10 footers where they think they hit a good putt, it hits something and misses, and where now the green surfaces are just so good, and
Yeah.
and you don't have to putt on the variety of greens now like when we did. When you were down in Florida, when you first went down there, you're like, what the hell's this? These Bermuda greens and those grain on the green and all that whole thing, right? And you had to, there's a whole different science to that, learning how to putt on Bermuda greens. You see guys going up and looking at the hole, like, you think there's a gold coin in there or something. Why are they looking at the hole, right? But you see the frayed edge, right? And you'd be like, getting to which way you look back, it's shiny, look, it's dark, and when the greens were longer, it was even more emphasized, right? So on slow Bermuda greens, right? That was, I mean, if you were a guy from California, you go down there, you got no chance.
Yeah, I had a heck of a time. I couldn't.
Yeah,
They,
that's a heck of a
it's
thing,
like
right?
putting on the moon from what I was used to.
That's right.
Yeah.
But now they're homogenizing all these tour events. They're putting on the same green speeds every week. I don't think that's making for better golfers. I mean, I think a great golfer is someone that can adapt to all these different conditions. I love taking a good like a tour player or a good college player, and I'll take them out to a public course around here. We'll go up to a play like Lincoln Park in San Francisco. It's a
Oh,
worse
yeah.
condition golf course. I mean, it's so bad. The greens are like tee boxes, right? But
Wait a
you know,
minute. Yeah, there's McLaren Park. Is that still there? McLaren Park Golf
McLaren.
Course
Where was that at McLaren?
in San Francisco by Daly City, I think.
Okay,
But
yeah,
anyway, it was
yeah,
a it was a city park course just like Lincoln Park.
yeah, McLaren, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Anyway,
then
go ahead.
they have the old the one out in Sharp Park out in
Yeah.
Pacifica. Yeah,
Sharp. Yeah.
yeah, not in good condition, but you can really learn, how to, there's a technique. And just like what you were talking about, where those guys were talking about putting a hook spin on it, right? For chipping, pitching, and even for putting. Bobby Locke way inside, put a hook spin on it. You can get the ball rolling, coming off the blade with a little hook spin on it. And it just tends to hug the grass a little bit better when it's coming off the blade, and you just make more putts. You start trying to cut the putt and that sort of thing on the rough greens, you know, forget it.
Well,
And
you
so
can
all
see.
of the conditions and stuff are really critical. I think, the great players were the ones that could play any conditions, you know,
Yeah.
bad greens, good greens, tight fairways, wide open.
Hey. All right. I got to tell you this real quick. I played in a tournament in Jackpot, Nevada. All right. This is like mid 80s. The golf course was so bad that we were allowed to put the ball on a tee for every shot through the green. I swear to God, too. Okay. Uh, this course is out there where there's nothing but tumbleweeds, So you could be off the fairway 50 yards out in the tumbleweeds and put it on a tee. I had one, I was on the fringe of the green and there was like a pothole in front from where I was to the green. That was only about a foot and a half. I put it on a tee and hit it off the tee and over the
over
yeah,
the bottle.
yeah, jackpot Nevada. So yeah, conditions weren't as good.
Yeah, I remember playing a junior golf tournament on Catalina Island, the island off Los Angeles area out
Yeah,
there, and the greens were Kikuya. Think about
really.
that.
Oh my
Kikuya
God.
greens.
I don't know how you made anything.
I mean, you'd have a 3 foot putt and you're like, it's like 50-50 from three
Yeah, it's
feet.
like all over the
You know,
place.
yeah, I remember, playing that tournament. But, I found that when the conditions were bad, I learned that half the field was eliminated before the
Oh yeah.
event. Half the
And then
guys
if
were
the
like,
wind blows, the other half is.
crying. They're crying about it. Oh, this place sucks. It's terrible. I mean, I'm not gonna. Half the field's just eliminated, and the good putters are like, I can't putt this stuff, and so at least you got, now you only have to beat half the guys. I always looked forward to the courses where the conditions weren't as good. Up in Canada, yeah, there were some pretty rough conditions up there on that tour. It was
Did you
Fort
ever play
McMurray.
Cape Highlands, Britain?
What's
Did you ever
that?
play Cape Highlands out in Nova Scotia? The
The
course
Cape
that
Highlands.
they had George Knudson, I think, played in a Shell's Wonderful World of Golf there.
Yeah, I don't think I know we played in New Brunswick, New Fredericton, New Brunswick. We played out of Prince
Yeah,
Edward Island.
I played
We
at a course in New Brunswick. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah. It was great. Canadian Tour is fantastic. It was real golf. Every week was something different. Courses were narrow. You had to hit it straight. Ball control. Knutson and Mo Norman coming out of Canada. Not surprising. It's bad weather, right? I remember September. We're playing out in Prince Edward Island in middle of September. It's getting cold. You know, I mean, it's getting cold out there. And I remember it was raining on the last round, and it was probably in the 30s, like 38 degrees, rain,
yeah.
just almost gonna snow, and windy and cold, and you're wearing rain gear, and guys are getting on the first tee and just could hardly even turn, to snap hook and drives into the thick wet grass like this. Guys are shooting 78, 80. And I remember I shot 71 the last round, and I had the low round of the day with a
Yeah.
71 by like a couple shots, I think like 74. And I went from like 46th place or something to seventh in one round,
Wow.
shooting a 71.
Yeah. And when the conditions are tough, that eliminates pretty much everybody.
Yeah, it
When the
really
wind
does.
blows, that eliminates a lot of guys.
Yeah, you got to learn to play in all kinds of weather and conditions. I just think that makes you a better golfer. You've got to know how to play in the wind, humidity, play the ocean when you're down low at sea level, and the fog, and the ball doesn't go as far. You got to learn to play in Colorado at high elevations, or Lake Tahoe. We play tournaments up there, putting on slow greens and fast greens and different kinds of bunkers, and the firmer bunkers to the fluffy sand that you'd have like at Cypress Point or something like that, and learning how to play all those different kinds of conditions. And when I was playing in the 1980s, I was playing down on the Australian tour, and it was very international fields. You had a lot of guys from Europe were coming in. You had guys from Asia and Japan and South America, U.S. and Canada, even South Africa. A very international field, and these were players that knew how to play all these conditions. They could play
Right.
bump and run. They learned the
Yeah.
European game, hitting low ball players. You get high ball players, guys that could
Mhm.
shape it and hold it in the wind and all that. And I just felt like the quality of golfers down there, to me, was better. The international players, I would say, better because they could handle more situations than what I see now on the tour. Everything, it's just like it's the same tournament every week. It just looks like the same conditions. And I think if you took those guys out of their comfort zone and made them play, a more rustic golf course or something, I think they'd be lost. Really, really struggling. So, the game, it has
Well,
changed a lot in that way. That's for
part of
sure.
that has to do with how well you could maneuver the ball back. It was so much easier to maneuver the ball back then than it is now. You know that the ball
Well, the
doesn't
ball,
spin like it used to.
that's right. You know,
Um, so
that's
you know
big
now you
controversy.
have low spin. They're hitting it 9 miles to get as close as green as possible. So they got a very short iron in. Doesn't matter where it goes off the tee for the most part, as long as there's not a tree in your way for the second shot. You can get around that.
Yeah.
And I'm not the old guy on my lawn saying, you know, that's not okay. I mean, that is okay. That's the game now. So they're adapting their game to what's going on. But yeah, it was completely different. You know, man, those old school teachers, if you hit a shot that didn't fit what it should be, man, you'd hear about it. You know, it's like I got another the book we were talking about, getting to the dance floor. Okay, you go look up Jackie Burke Jr. He's playing in the Ryder Cup at Pinehurst. His partner is Clayton Hefner. This is like 53. Hogan's on the team. Snead is the captain. Okay, and he's paired. Burke is paired with Hefner, and he's struggling. And Hefner gets on him, and he said, "Don't you ever go in there with a curve? You're always going in there." He said, "Quit shooting straight." You know, that's what we would move the ball. We'd move it right to left. We move it left to right to fit the situation. But the ball spun more. We could do
Yeah.
that. It's harder to do that right today. So
Yeah.
you don't see it as much.
Well, the high spinning ball it's a more sophisticated golf ball. It's designed for great players.
Mhm.
It's not designed for mid handicappers. Back when we were playing the high spinning balata ball, that was your low amateurs, your good players, and your pros would always play the spinniest ball we could because we were good players and we could shape it. We welcome the spin. Give us more options. Um, nobody was winning a tournament with a top flight or a pinnacle back then, right? I mean, do you ever remember anybody winning a tournament with a golf ball like that? I mean, you couldn't hold it on the greens, you couldn't spin it. It was just not a golf ball that was going to produce, championship results. So, I think what's happened is the game's been kind of homogenized by the equipment and particularly the golf ball, the high spinning ball. It would be like if you're in billiards, right? You're playing pool, and the good players are they're putting English on it, spin it and spinning it all around. Um, if they said, okay, well, you can't put any chalk on the tip or anything like that, it's just going to be just a smooth hard surface, and it's just going to be hard on hard, and you can't spin it, right? I mean, that would just destroy the game, right? I mean, the good player would be like, I can't do all the stuff I need to do. But the someone that just plays pool, once a month or something, they wouldn't even know there's a difference. Like, who cares? I don't know how to spin the ball. I'm just trying to hit the one, hit the hit the one ball into another. Just just do something like that. So I think there's you know, this lost art of ball shaping, curving the ball, and all of this that really made the game really fascinating and interesting. And you would graduate from one level to another. Remember the like an amateur player that was, if you were just a 20 handicap or a 30, you would just hit a top flight or a pinnacle or something, right? I mean, you just because you'd cut it, right? The balata ball, you go through 12 balls and 12 holes or something. If you're, so they
Yeah.
then you went to like the Serlin covered wound ball. Like remember there was the Titleist DT, I think it was called. It was
Sure.
like,
They sold a
right?
ton of those.
Yeah, and that was like, it had Titleist on it, so you would move from like pinnacle or top flight. Oh, now I'm playing a Titleist, but of course it was a junk ball for a good player. You never play a Titleist DT if you're a good player, but now you're like a 15, maybe down to a 7 handicap, and you start getting the lower handicaps. Then you start entertaining hitting the pro ball, the Balata ball, because you got a good enough golf swing. You're not gonna put a smile on the thing. People don't realize that you made a bad swing. You'd literally just open the
Oh
cover up
yeah.
on the golf ball.
Yeah.
You'd see the
Absolutely.
windings inside. It's I've told this story before, but I went to I was playing in the Northeast Amateur at Wannamoisett, and they took us over to Acushnet, Massachusetts, to the Titleist factory. We got to take a tour if we wanted to do that. So we went over there and we saw how they made the Titleist golf balls. The rubber bands, it was something like 6 miles of rubber bands just in one golf ball or something,
Yeah.
and the cover and everything. But you remember there was the 90 compression and the 100 compression, right? And we saw how they determined the 90 to the 100. They were this. It was the same golf ball. Everything was the same. They rolled the balls down a slope, and they would hit the bottom and they would bounce. And there was a ledge here, and if they came short, they were 90, and if it got over the ledge, they were
Oh,
hundreds.
really?
And that's how they did. That's how they did it. I mean, kind of low tech, right? I mean, but if it just had a little bit more pop to it, came down the slope and go boing 90, boing 100. And there were a bunch of balls coming down at the same time, and sometimes they were hitting in the air, colliding with each other. It was just kind of a mess. So I realized then that give me 90s, 100s, whatever you got. It's like
Just give me a ball.
just give me them. Yeah.
Hey, I gotta go to bed.
It's getting late. Well, Kevin, it's been great. We've definitely taken a deep dive, haven't we, into the golf swing, and your knowledge is fantastic.
I think we've just scratched the surface. And if you want
Yeah.
to know more about Hogan, we have even hardly touched the surface.
Well, we can do another episode sometime and dive down deeper into that stuff if you like.
Sure.
I'm sure everyone that's watched this is going to have some things to think about. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and it's important that people like you and I talk and document this stuff for the future, because there's a lot of lost knowledge that's just going to be gone. And I think at some point the golf world's going to wake up. I really believe it. I think the classic true game is it still has to exist. It's just got to exist. I mean, if you look at classic car racing, or you look at Indy cars, Formula One, from dune buggies to there's so many drag racing. I just think that the classic game, that running from the era that we're talking about, let's just say it from the birth of steel shafts in the early 30s all the way up to say the mid 90s. There's a huge history there of that game, where the game really didn't change that much, right? It didn't really change much from Augusta. The Masters was playing 6,800 yards in 1940 all the way into the 1990. Still the same length. Scores were pretty similar. Guys were coming into 15 with 4-woods or long irons from all the way back to the 30s and 40s, all the way into the 90s, and now they're hitting short irons in and that sort of thing. Yeah. So the game has there's like a 60 or 70 years there that game that we were taught, and I still think that there's room for that game to exist when the big wake up happens. Like, they're already starting to talk about it. I mean, there's more and more discussion about it. I mean, what happened with Cypress Point with the Walker Cup, and guys were hitting wedges into par fives out there. I mean, could you imagine Alistair McKenzie just gone like, didn't design the hole? I feel bad for the kids that they're not getting to play these courses in the intention and the direction that it was given to them, because it's much more interesting and it's fascinating to play a golf course correctly, like the angles and hit it here and there. And if you're hitting it 50 yards farther than it was intended, you're just missing the point. You're missing the point.
Different
game. So
yeah.
Okay, Kevin.
Let's do this again.
Yeah, we'll do it again. Sounds great.
Thank you.